tabletop versus online? Because
Yes.
you grew up with the idea of the tabletop.
Tabletop, hard to find players, you had to explain what Dungeons and Dragons was.
Mm-hmm.
These days, everybody knows about D&D. It's, are you still playing D&D? There's so many other games out there. Or I play this flavor of D&D. And I'm like, okay, I played first edition, second edition, third edition, 2.5, 3, 3.5. Nobody talks about 4. And now I'm into 5. Why? Because if I get new players, I want to be able to say, go buy these books or get this information. Because in the earliest days, you needed people to have copies of the books.
Mm-hmm.
And if you were running an edition that nobody could get, then they were confused about what the rules were like. These days, you could get on the internet and say, we're running first edition, and you could download the first edition rules and just deal with playing D&D.
Mm-hmm.
Personally, that would drive me crazy.
But you also lived through the days where Pathfinder spun off from D&D.
Yes. In the earliest of days, it came from Sword and Sorcery. I had a copy of that, and then foolishly I cleaned out my cabinet over here, and I went, well, who would want this? Oh, chainmail. It was chainmail. Who would want this? And I threw it out. Oops. But the first thing that spun off was Call of Cthulhu. Still popular horror, because D&D is great for, fantasy and barbarians and Conan, but not so much when you've got horror. Now some DMs do it really well, but Call of Cthulhu bounced off of that.
Mm-hmm.
And then when we had all kinds of trouble with it was TSR. I still call them TSR too.
What's TSR?
Tactical something. TSR was the first company that came out with Dungeons and Dragons. They were Dave Arneson and Gary Gygax's company.
Mm-hmm.
TSR. I could look up. You guys could look it up. TSR. And they had a nice little company in Milwaukee. Then Wizards of the Coast came through with magic cards, and they went, we've got all this money, what do we want to do? Let's buy Dungeons and Dragons, because in those days TSR was having a great amount of trouble. They had great ideas, great imagination, but they grew so fast that they outgrew their money flow. And then Wizards of the Coast came in and said, we'll buy that. And they went, okay. Now, certainly, I don't know the very background. I've only heard things from the people that I know who used to work there.
Mm-hmm.
So all of this could be just me remembering things.
Let's not
crazy.
worry about the dates and the facts.
Right.
But let's learn about, what it was like seeing everything spin off at that point.
It was scary. I had a well-established game. I still have this well-established game. And you're like, is there going to be Dungeons and Dragons supplements put out? Now, I don't play the supplements. Because I was old and I started out making my own up. When you make up your own, you're familiar with what you're doing. And if you have a supplement, you're kind of a little bit afraid, because if somebody else read the supplement, they'll be like, I go and find that secret room with all the treasure. And I'm like, it's not there. Yes, it is. I don't need that kind of an argument. So but I buy supplements, and then I steal the best parts of them. Ooh, I like this monster. Ooh, I like this treasure. Ooh, I like this room idea.
So you don't exactly play what it is entailed, but you simply just blend it into your own. And that's the beauty of D&D.
Yes. Ideas and story, and the people sitting at the table with their part of the story, they're the heroes. I'm the world that they're interacting with. I'm the villains. I'm the obstacles. But I was worried, because there it was sold. What am I going to do? Well, I've got an established game. I can continue on with the homebrew rules, the basement rules, and I can keep going forever.
At this rate, you pretty much are.
And I don't need them. You
don't need it. You don't need it, man.
First shot's free. So then I'm like, okay. Then they spun off, and Pathfinder started, and the people at Hasbro / Wizards of the Coast, because Wizards of the Coast was acquired by Hasbro, because Hasbro said there's Pokemon to be had. That's real.
Hasbro and Pokemon?
Didn't I tell you? Yeah. Hasbro. Hasbro wanted the rights to the Pokemon game.
Really? Hasbro tried to license Pokemon.
Yes, my daughter. We will speak later.
Well, well, we gotta fact check that.
Oh, well, go for it. You'll find out.
Okay.
They tried to get Pokemon because it turned out that Wizards of the Coast bought some rights to Pokemon. It was one of the early Pokemon games. And Hasbro brought it, and then Hasbro said, what's this D&D thing? Okay, this is just my opinion. This is the way I look at it. But they said, what's this Dungeons & Dragons thing? Well, it's very complicated, and it's very small for Hasbro. They're talking Pokemon numbers, and Dungeons & Dragons is very small. It's very here.
Back in the day, it was very small.
It's one of those things that Dungeons & Dragons has formulated the entire industry. They went from board games, moved the sergeant an inch, to imagination storytelling, and everybody these days, you walk in and say, I play Dungeons & Dragons, and everybody goes, oh, we used to play that, or we still are playing that.
With that in mind, how was it growing up playing Dungeons & Dragons?
I had a blast. I had no problem. These days you hear about all these people who are girls. Oh, girls don't do this. Oh, you're the girlfriend. Oh, only girlfriends are brought to D&D games. No, I was the DM. I was the host of the party. I was the people coming to my basement to play in my game. I had no trouble with people looking at me going, wait, you play Dungeons & Dragons? And I'd be, yes. The area that I lived in, no one looked at me or any of the girls sitting at my table and would say, no, you're just a girl. You don't understand. Do you have a chainmail bikini? No. Did you want one?
Proof that fake gamer girls was always an issue even back in the day. But I was not worried about the gender problem. I was worried about the stigma of playing nerd kind of games.
I was in college. So I was in college, and by the time you kind of get to college, I was certainly already baked. So the idea of, you're a weirdo. Yes, I am. The science fiction club that I belonged to had a campus convention. We had a lovely science fiction guest because we had a stipends from the campus management. All the teachers and everything like, oh yeah, you can have this money if you bring in a good author, and if we can use him for one of our talks. And we're like, yes. So we got people like Harlan Ellison, and
who's Harlan Ellison?
What?
Who's Harlan Ellison?
Harlan Ellison is one of the writers.
Of what?
Of science fiction.
Okay, what does he wrote?
I would have to look up. I don't know. My mother would know because she's the hard science fiction person. But we had all kinds of really
now people are going to scream in the comments about that sort of stuff.
That. Good! Harlan Ellison. He was wonderful. And my middle name, my maiden name is Harlan. So when we had Harlan Ellison over, it was great. And he doesn't type anything except on a typewriter. He never used the computer in those days. And he's a hard science fiction guy. My mother loved it. And we had a lot of people coming to the cons to see the big authors that we managed to get. Timothy Zahn and Alan Dean Foster, and we had a lot of really big name authors at the time. And then we found that there's local conventions. There's other people in my area. We live in the Detroit area. Other people who are like, we're running a science fiction con. I'm there because I learned that the science fiction name covered the fantasy blanket, so that I could go and find my Dragon Riders of Pern club. And
okay, what's Dragon Riders of Pern?
Dragon Riders of Pern is a lovely series of many, many books written by Anne McCaffrey. See, now this part I know because it's fantasy. Written by Anne McCaffrey, and it's a lovely story about soul binding with dragons and the fact that their planet was veering close to another planet, and the poisonous atmosphere or animals of the atmosphere would spin off and come and try and eat their world.
Science fiction dragons, everybody.
Loved them. Used parts of them in my D&D game. Just parts, because you take a little from everything. And I ran I took over the fan club, and I knew Anne McCaffrey, and I had the biggest Dragon Riders of Pern fan club, we used to put out a fanzine over 300 pages every month of stories and art and poetry and everything.
Now
And
tell us about that.
years and years and years. We did Anne McCaffrey. I wrote to her. We sent her copies of things. We would go to conventions. We had dragon hatchings. We had hundreds of members. It was a whole lot of looking at stories, accepting stories, typing up stories, putting artwork with them, and Xeroxing things in the middle of the night. Harlan Electric in the middle of the night, Xeroxing, and then newsletters, and that was fabulous. I did it for Elfquest. I had the biggest Elfquest fan club. I'm an overachiever.
How many fan clubs were you a part of?
I had about 5 Pern fan clubs. I ran one, and I was part of about 5 because people would exchange newsletters for newsletters back then.
Mm-hmm.
And then there was the Pern or the Elfquest stuff because that was really well drawn and the story was so good.
Tell us about Elfquest.
Elfquest is a comic book series about elves who had, they were tiny things that they had evolved to be small, and they were in the woods, and the humans were trying to kill them, and they were trying to find their heritage in a place where they could live in peace and wonder. And they were little barbarian types because they were wood elves, and there was lots of stories and overcoming personalities, and gorgeously drawn. Lovely.
Like Fern Gully.
Yeah.
But obviously as elves and stuff. But you had all of these different other fandoms and other things they were a part of. And then since you were the leader, you were the person running all of this.
I was. I'm
because
pushy
you're
that way.
crazy.
I'm pushy that way. I know what to do and how to do it, and I say, get out of my way, let's do this.
Mm-hmm. And you ran all these clubs, and then suddenly when Dungeons and Dragons popped on the scene, it was just a no-brainer just to jump in and be like that. What came first, though?
Dungeons and Dragons came first.
Okay.
Because when you're in high school, everything is about high school. I read, but everything was about high school. College is where I found what science fiction fandom was, and fantasy fandom was part of that umbrella. And that's where it happened. And then by going to the local conventions, I found the Pern fan club. And then when I found Elfquest, and I found that there were other Elfquest fans in my area, we like got together at a state park. And I'm like, there's enough people here for a club. And then because I knew what to do in the Pern fan clubs, you write stories, you get pictures, you talk about your characters, you get together with picnics every once in a while. And I'm like, let's do that for this too. And because I knew what to do, how to do it, make sure you were on time, make sure it was all done. And then the D&D game never stopped. D&D was Sunday. D&D is always Sunday. I don't care if it's Mother's Day. I don't care that I'm a mother. D&D is Sunday.
I know that one of your biggest one of your biggest gifts is just to make sure that you have enough time for gaming.
It's true. Easter Sunday, everybody's like, it's Easter, we're going to get together. And I'm like, that's nice. We'll get together for brunch. Well, we're going to have Easter dinner this year. And I'm like, that'll be nice. Have a good time. Because gaming. But my family and friends all know it's gaming on Sunday. So there we are.
The dedication is what makes it.
I figure it's like, because it's 52 weeks a year and it's 40 years. So I'm like running on over 2,000 games.
Were there any times or parts in that time frame that it dipped? Like, was there any time that the game was threatened other than this pandemic that we've been living through?
No, the game was never threatened. I mean, there was a time where I'm like, okay, we're going to stop playing in college and we're going to come and play in my house. That was no brainer because I still had the gamers.
But that doesn't count. That's a transitional stuff.
Right, the players came with. I never had any trouble saying, oh, well, maybe I shouldn't play anymore. There was always the idea of, well, what do I want to do? I want a game. I want to tell stories with people. I want to see people sit down and tell stories. I had a time when I only had 2 players. I had a time where we had to move from one place to another, but always locally. And the players were always there. So no, I've never particularly had a threat for the game. Mm-hmm. I mean, you were born and I was gaming. Let's see, I'm out of the hospital now, guys. Gaming. Got married. Okay, we're leaving on Monday for the honeymoon. We got married on a Saturday. And I'm like, we'll be leaving on Monday because gaming is on Saturday or Sunday.
So you even had a game right after your marriage.
I did. It was fun.
Mm-hmm.
I had a game. Okay, I was late to gaming in the early days of college.
Mm-hmm.
We had a table, and all the people got at the table, and I was late. We drove like a maniac. I don't remember why I was late. I always drive like a maniac. And I got to the college, and I ran down to the game, and I found my table full of friends, and there was a guy who was running something. And I apologized for being late, and I got out all my books and my pads of paper and my dice, and I said, "What are we playing? Because I'm part of this group." And they all looked at me and they said, no, we're running in your game. We're in the middle of this. Shut up, sit down. And the guy who was the DM, who was DMing, he was packing up his stuff. No, I'll get out of your chair, Diana. I was like, I'm sorry, I'm late. What are we playing? And he's like, no, we're playing your game. Shut up, sit down, get your dice out.
But you were so willing to just jump into this, whatever the one shot was being played at the time. Just being like, no, it's a game. Let's go.
Right, because it's not like I was like ruling the universe.
Right.
But you know what? I was.
But it was also not like you instantly came in and be like, now stop what you're doing.
No, I was not an iron tyrant.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like,
don't be a tyrant in your games.
Don't be a tyrant in your games. Make sure that if you're DMing the game, you're making it fun for everybody at the table. They're telling the story with you.
Mm-hmm.
So don't be a tyrant. Unnecessary. No, it's never necessary. Don't be a tyrant.
You can have a tyrant in the game. But
yes.
they're usually going to try and defeat
the tyrant.
That happens.
It does. Everything happens in the game because you can never tell.
Mm-hmm.
So there's stuff I've invented. I've given coupons at Christmas, and I've...
Okay, well, we're inventing things for the long run of this game.
Yes.
What are some things that you have created to supplement your game?
What do you mean?
As in, like, you've obviously made some stuff up for your game over the years.
Yes.
Like you were just saying, the coupons.
The coupons. At Christmas, I realized that it would be fun to give my players like a get out of jail free card. Except we don't have jail, or at least nobody goes to jail. So I sat down and I'm like, okay, here's this rule, and you can have this score on this rule, and here's a magic item for you, and here, if you want to roll a good stat for your character, and I would give them coupons. And the first set of coupons I gave out, I didn't realize they would be so wonderful that the players would hold on to them. I gave out my first
But what do the coupons do?
In the middle of the game, if you're like, I really want to kill this monster, I get a second strike. If you have the coupon that says second strike, you're like, I play it. And then they hand it to me. I write a D on the back because I always draw pictures for all the coupons. They're different every year. And then I sign the back of it and I hand it back and I say, now you have a second strike. Go ahead and do that.
So it's a one-use coupon sort of deal.
Right, unless you get the wild card. And the wild card is good for any of the cards. Mm-hmm. Colin really got me this year because he used this card really, really, really well. I'm like, you can't do that. Yes, I guess you can.
But that's also part of the give and flow of making sure the players are happy.
Happy, and if I'm putting it out there, I'm the DM. I can always say, ha ha, this horrible thing happens, and now you're all dead. How did this get to be so long, Indy? And they've all woken up dead. So, okay, let's move on to the next episode.